Hi everyone, welcome to History on Trial. This is Dr. Tracey McCarthy. We are going to be talking about the Iberians, the Kingdom of Iberia. The Iberians sailed around the globe, pretty much conquering and colonizing from east to the west. And what most people think about when they think about Iberia is they think about the Iberian Peninsula. And so they think about Portugal and they think about Spain, these really tiny geopolitical spaces. But what we have here is a dynamic where there's some confusion about exactly what Iberia is and where Iberia is located and who are the Iberian people. And as we look at who the Iberian people are and who the Iberian people have been, what will happen is it will call into question a number of things about history and historical narratives, particularly as it relates to things such as racial classifications, those identities of Negroid, Caucasoid, and Mongoloid. And so we're going to dig into this and look to see what we can find related to who the Iberian people are. Now, this dynamic is tied to some of the narratives in Europe, some of the narratives in Africa, and of course, some of the narratives in the Americas. If this appears on anything other than Dr. Tracey McCarthy, it is stolen and unauthorized. Let's get started. Now let's first address this very bizarre dynamic where you have a number of places around the world with the same place name. This creates so much confusion. And so now in history, at this point in time, you have a number of places named Iberia, a number of places that have been named Iberia over time. So you see Iberia is a parish in Louisiana, you have Iberia in Ohio, Bolivia, Colombia, Ecuador, Guatemala, Cuba. You have Iberia everywhere, including the Iberian Peninsula. What this does is over time, it can create confusion about exactly what is Iberia and who the actual Iberian people are. And so when you move this place name around the globe in this way, it creates a significant amount of confusion over time. Okay, again, normally when people think about Iberia, they think about Spain and Portugal, but I want to draw your attention to the number 2 entry, which is related to the Georgian Republic. And also down below, you will see that betacism dynamic going on again, and this occurs with Iberian. And so Iberian is also Iverian, and that B and that V are interchangeable. You'll also notice in some historical contexts that the B and the P are also interchangeable. So it's very important to note because you may be looking at theoretically the same word, but it's spelled differently, and so therefore it might create a little bit of confusion. And so Iberian is also Iverian. And here you can see the Kingdom of Iberia located in the Caucasus area. And here's another depiction on this map. You can stop this and read it so that you can get a better understanding of the location of the ancient area known as Iberia, that Iberian kingdom. And so you can see it's in the area which is now Georgia, and this is a country in Trans-Caucasian. It's located at the eastern end of the Black Sea, and it's surrounded by places such as Russia and Armenia, Turkey. And so when you look on a map in present times, you can see where it would have been located. Now we're going to look at multiple depictions of people from that area, and the people that we're going to be looking at are people known as Abkhazians. And so you can see the depictions here on the screen. The people have diverse phenotypes, but as you recall, race is really about nationality. It's not as much about phenotype as many people would be led to believe. And so these individuals on the screen are identified as Caucasians in all of their diversity. And here you can see a depiction of the individuals that were on the right-hand side of the screen. And as you can see, they do not possess the traditional Nordic features that are typically associated with the moniker Caucasian. And here you see additional individuals, and these were the individuals on the left-hand side of the screen. And in this depiction, you can see, again, a significant amount of diversity and, again, non-Nordic looking features for these individuals who are identified as Caucasian. And here you see some other indications of the betacism dynamic with Iberi. And you can see IBRI or IVRI. And another thing that happens is that when individuals often see Iber or Iberi or Heber, there's an automatic assumption that the people being identified are actually the offspring of Eber, biblically Shem's grandson. And this may or may not be the case, but at any rate, you can see that this betacism dynamic is going on, so that you know when you see Iberi or Ivri that these are interchangeable. Now there are a few interesting notes related to this surname, Iber and also Eber. What's interesting, again, you have that betacism dynamic going on, but you also have an interesting notation related to a group in Africa. And so often you will hear those of Igbo descent make note of the relationship between Igbo and the word Eber or Heber. And here you see a connection here. And so the notation is Iber is German in origin, as a German surname. And there's a discussion about the origins of this. And there's a dynamic whereby there's a suggestion that perhaps this comes from the Frisian personal name Igbo. And so you can see the little arrow pointing there. And so you can do a little bit more research on the Frisians also. This is interesting because the Igbo claim to not know exactly where they came from. They believe they came from the north. And so in some instances, you will hear about some groups on the West African coast now coming from the east. Then you'll hear some coming from the north. And so this is a very important notation because the Igbo are already identifying as being connected with this particular name. And so we're going to look at this a little bit more. And here you see the name Eber with the E this time, still related to Germany and also Austria. And so it's also related to the Celtic people. Austria was considered the original home to the Celtic people, according to some narratives. And so you have this dynamic whereby Eber is related to the Celtic people, the German people, perhaps the Igbo of Africa. And we also have this dynamic whereby it's not just about Portugal and Spain, but about points further north and east. Now we're going to look at a few depictions of Caucasian people. And of course, these look slightly different from the depictions that you are used to seeing in relation to this moniker. And what happens is there's a conflation that's going on whereby people who have a particular phenotype are automatically identified as Caucasian, but Caucasian is actually a specific group of people. It does not really mean all Europeans. Caucasians are from a particular area in Europe, and these are some of those people. And so you'll notice that they have a similar uniform. That's going to be a common thread going through these different pictures. You can see that this phenotype is inconsistent with the Nordic phenotype that is usually asserted in relation to being Caucasian. And if you look at other Caucasian people in that area, you will see that they do not have the Nordic phenotype typically. And here are some additional older pictures of Caucasians. What's interesting about the headgear is that the headgear is such that on certain individuals in this picture, it looks like their hair. And then for some other individuals, it looks like a hat. But for some of them, it's kind of difficult to tell whether you're looking at hair or whether you're looking at actual headgear. And here are additional depictions of Caucasians. And again, you'll notice the uniform, that similarity with the uniform. So regardless of the phenotype that you see this common thread with the uniform. And here's yet another depiction of the Abkhazians in that area. And again, the similarity with the uniform. So regardless of phenotype, you see the similarity with the uniform. You might also make note of the fact that the headgear is similar to some of the depictions that we looked at previously related to some American Indian groups. And here you have a depiction of a family identified as Afro-Abkhazian. People are often identified as Afro, quote unquote Afro, when they have darker skin. However, there is nothing to support the contention that all brown people originated from the groups that are currently in Africa. And so again, this is an Abkhazian family. You see that the man on the left-hand side again has that same uniform on. And here you see additional depictions. You see the men with the same uniform on again. You also see depictions with a phenotype that is inconsistent with the Nordic phenotype. So this would be a very dark phenotype. And here you see some additional depictions of individuals who are identified as Caucasian. Now, as we wrap this up, you see another depiction on the screen of an individual who is also Caucasian, Abkhazian in that area, same uniform, same headgear for this individual with the phenotype. The headgear, of course, looks very similar to what might be hair for this individual. Again, not fitting that stereotypical Nordic phenotype that tends to go with this idea, the schema of Caucasian. However, when you look at even individuals today who are in that area, their phenotype generally, by and large, that's not a Nordic phenotype that you see today. One other thing that would be interesting in terms of research would be finding out the extent to which there is a relationship between the Igbo of West Africa, who also identify with a portion of this name, Iberia, with this Iber. Finding out the extent to which there is a relationship between the Igbo of West Africa and the ancient Iberian people in that Kingdom of Iberia. Again, the Igbo identifies coming from the north, the east, and so this would fit with that historical narrative. One additional thing to consider when doing your research, particularly about your ancestry, is really checking on these names. You have this dynamic where you have multiple places with the same name, and then the stripping of a name from one place where that was the original name, and then putting that name and that place name somewhere else. And so this creates a significant amount of historical confusion, because after a while you don't really know who you're talking about or where you are talking about. And this is the case with Iberia. Remember, knowledge is power. Take care and see you soon.